Good morning, Brian.
Hi, Joe.
Lovely of you to give your time to come and chat about it's a vital topic to bring to light, I think. We've talked about it in the past.
Yeah.
And we have, in the UK, we have Father's Day coming up this weekend.
Yep.
And we felt it would be great to discuss the topic of baby loss, baby death, and how that affects particularly men.
Yeah.
Which is often not really talked about, not discussed, often brushed under the carpet. And so we thought we'd have a really open, honest, just natural chat around this subject and hopefully bring some light, some comfort to anyone who may be affected by this.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So Brian, we've been friends for a number of years now. So we were neighbours, and now you've moved, but we've kept our friendship going, which is lovely. And Brian, can you explain why you're able to talk about this topic from a place of experience for us?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I will. In 1989, our daughter Siobhan was stillborn. My wife Jo was 42 weeks pregnant. She was overdue. She went to the hospital to be in on the Sunday to stay overnight, to be induced on the Monday. And when they put the monitor on her on the Monday morning, there was no heartbeat. And Siobhan was delivered, and we had Siobhan a long time, 1989, a long time ago, not as advanced as now, but we had her for 6 hours or so, and grandparents came to visit and meet Siobhan. And at the time I was 28 and Jo was 27, and she was our first baby. We've gone on since to have two fantastic children, a daughter and a son, and now we're also grandparents. So it is a long time ago, but it is a feeling that lives with you. And as I talk, I can hear my voice wobbling at times because you relive. And so that's my personal experience. And I'm also the chair of Essex SANDS. SANDS are the stillbirth and neonatal death charity, and they provide support to parents and for baby loss that have occurred shortly before birth, at birth, and shortly after birth. And in addition to supporting parents and families, SANDS does excellent, outstanding work with health professionals in terms of training and support for them, and indeed does excellent work on research and prevention of baby loss, with the levels of baby loss in the UK being quite extraordinarily high compared to many other developed nations. In the UK, there's a baby death at the level of 14 a day, which is, when you compare it to many other countries, it is a very high level of baby mortality. So there's a lot of families around the UK who continue to experience this unusual but extremely painful bereavement. And as chairman of Essex SANDS, I'm also trained as a befriender, So SANDS trains volunteer befrienders, all of whom who are bereaved parents, and SANDS, the befrienders, support parents and their families who contact SANDS. We run support groups. SANDS runs over 100 support groups across the UK. And we have continued to run our support groups in Essex through the lockdown via Zoom, but we're looking forward to getting back to face-to-face meetings, hopefully later in the summer.
So you really have experienced this topic from multiple angles. It's obviously been that big difference in time, 30 years ago, much has changed, but what seems very apparent is the fact that a woman carries that baby inside of herself. So a woman physically bonds with the baby, and there's a natural connection there already. And the mother, the woman goes through this terrible loss. And often hearts go to the mum, the woman. And as the man, as the husband or the partner, you're kind of often left to share the news with people, and everyone's asking how the mum is and how terrible, and thoughts go to the mum. And how does this affect you as the man, as the father, as the partner?
It is, yes. So I speak not only from my own experience of all those years ago, but I've had the privilege of meeting many couples, many fathers through my volunteering work with SANDS, and so have spoken to many about this subject, and indeed observed many dealing with their grief. It is complex. I mean, certainly there is of course a physical and a natural bond for the woman and the baby, and it is, to me, therefore right and natural that there is a strong focus on the bereaved mother that goes beyond the physical reality that she is dealing with, and that is only right and proper. But it is so important that society also recognises the pain and bereavement of the partner who's the male. And as society has changed, that is certainly becoming better and more recognised. It wasn't so many years ago, and indeed very much in my lifetime. Certainly my father was never present at any of the births of his children, so it is in relatively recent past that even the father has been present at the birth of their respective children. But the fact remains that the complexity of baby loss, where you're mourning the lost years and hopes that you wished for, is emotionally painful for either sex. As a man, you can only have, obviously, a baby in one particular way. You still bond with that child through the 9 months, and you grow to love that child, and the excitement that that brings, and therefore for that to be taken away, indeed at whatever stage of gestation, doesn't have to be the length it was for us, and indeed whatever length of gestation, the loss of that love and those hopes and dreams and the scale of that loss and is so painful, and you can't and you know, if these poor parents whose children die in older years, a few years on, or in teenagers, there is, that is clearly more recognized because people can associate, they've met the baby, they've met the young child, they've met the teenager, and therefore in supporting bereaved parents in those circumstances, it is more natural for society to recognise the man's grief. But in baby loss, where there isn't any memories, there isn't any years in which you can relate to, society struggles to acknowledge the man's grief more so than the woman's. It is only right and proper that the woman gets that focus and that attention, but it is hugely important for the man's mental well-being and ongoing chance of recovery, I would say, that there is acknowledgement of their pain, their suffering, and they are not an afterthought, which is sadly often evident, but though very much better as the years go by. So it is complex, and indeed I hear often both parents talk to me about their families not reacting in the way they would have hoped, or mates, especially in the men's mates, not reacting in the way they'd hoped. And I'm personally understanding of that, because if the shoe was on the other foot, would we all understand and be able to associate with the grief that I'm trying to articulate? Mm-hmm. Maybe not, quite probably not. And the people that really understand it are other parents who've been through such horrific experiences. Hence, our charity is a support group from other bereaved parents, but it is difficult for families and friends to acknowledge and understand, particularly for the male issue, because of not obviously having the physical connection and bond developed with the child that the mother does, and a tendency, oh, he'll be all right, he'll get over it. And you can, of course, develop and improve and recover in time, but it does help to have that pain acknowledged. And when it isn't acknowledged by friends and family, of course, that gives men to subconsciously to behave into the role that society is creating for us, which is carry on, get on, be the stereotypical breadwinner.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah. Man up, get on with it.
Man up, get out, look after your partner, care for her, pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay the bills, and look after your partner. See you later.
Yeah. And what is the danger, Brian, of what is the danger of this? Because for a man to bottle up his feelings, I mean, we all know that men have been taught, you know, men haven't been role modelled on how to express emotions as a natural thing. And I mean, the lovely thing about you, Brian, is that you are quite open emotionally. So you're happy to talk about this. You're happy to cry in, you know, aren't you? You're not embarrassed to cry about something that touches you, which is how it should be. It's natural. It's natural. So to suppress those emotions, what does it do to all of these men who are suffering?
So there's a couple of things. There's a number of things that spring to mind in thinking about that. I mean, what it does is, I mean, clearly, if you're repressing and burying a strongly, I mean, such a strongly held emotion, that is going to come out in some other way, shape, or form. Whatever that could be.
That's the ultimate helpless feeling, isn't it? It's absolute helplessness.
Well, yeah. So, So in terms. So I'll come back to the point about how does it, what does it do by not dealing with that grief, but to the point of helplessness, which relates to what you previously asked about, how does it come out? So helplessness. So you're there. Whatever stage of gestation, and the baby dies, you're there as a man, you're observing, you're on the outside, the medical professions, the medical team have taken over. There may have been a couple of 3 weeks of build up of lack of baby movement or whatever, so you're there observing these events, and then you observe potentially the pain of being told. You observe your partner falling to bits. You observe the birth, potentially, quite probably. You hold, hopefully, the body of your child, but you're helpless. You are helpless, and it is totally out of your control. And I say that because we're brought up, stereotyped from an early age, to meet a partner, love a partner, care for a partner, fix things if they go wrong, whether that's the car or whether it's, I couldn't fix the car, if it's fix things and sort things out, protect, nurture, care, and the ultimate failure potentially in that nurturing and caring is what you're observing in front of you. You've got no control to do anything about it. So there's a massive helplessness that can be there can be a guilt potentially for some associated with that. There's certainly a guilt in both parents through baby loss. For the mother, will have guilt questions about, I should have done this, I could have done that. As a father, your question, should we have intervened? Should we have been more assertive? Should I have knocked on the consultant's door? Should I have broken down the consultant's door? How did I let it get to this? And that failure of nurturing that can be, you can ascribe to yourself, comes out in anger and guilt, and therefore, by not dealing with those emotions and feelings, which are not just pain, but their anger, their guilt, their failure, you're repressing them. It'll affect your mental well-being to whatever degree that may lead to. You know, whatever, depression, drink alcohol, whatever, running away from it. And there's some pretty horrific statistics around 60% of couples that have a stillbirth end up in breakup, and that's 40% of couples who've had baby death after a live birth break up within 10 years. So there's pretty horrific statistics, which you can understand, because if you as a man are not dealing with your own emotions, and certainly if you're not perceived by your partner to be dealing with those emotions when she is barely struggling to exist, she will resent the apparent failure of yourself to address your grief. The fact that you're going along in the car or the van and crying your eyes out by yourself, nobody sees that. No. But if you're running away from your grief and not having dialogue with anyone around your grief, that is painful for a partner to observe, and you can understand why resentment comes. And you can also understand, I can very much understand, whilst in wanting to escape your grief, you might choose to escape that through, as I say, any other means, alcohol or anything else, or drugs, to run away from your grief. And indeed, self-evidently, and we do it in many different aspects of our lives, when you've got a partner you care about, often, certainly as a man, you will often be hesitant to share your feelings of pain with her, in this case, or whoever sexual partner is, because you don't want to hurt them. So therefore, you don't share your feelings because you've seen your partner in pain. You don't want to exacerbate that pain by loading on your anguish as well. And so therefore, best to shut up.
So there's this kind of natural, almost a comparison. It's like, well, for a man, well, my pain compared to the woman, it can't compare. And actually, the experience can't compare, but the emotions definitely can compare. And one thing that you've said before is that for a man, well, I'd like you to say it in your own words, but for a man, this is your highest. You say it in your way.
How do I say it? It's easier to say when we're chatting, Joe, than we're doing this. Yeah, you can, fathers love their children, full stop. Mothers love their children. There is not a Premier League and League Two around a mother's love compared to a father's love. We love our children, full stop, end of story. We love our children as they grow and as they develop to whatever age they are. And equally, you love your babies at the point of birth, whatever the gestation of that birth is. And whether that baby is born sleeping or that baby is born fully fit, you love that baby. And that is no different to my love for my other children in many, many ways. And the height of my love as a man can only be expressed through my relationship, nurture, care example to my children. I can't express that love through the physical bond of pregnancy, obviously, but that emotion and that bond develops from the time your wife tells you she's had a pregnancy test and she is pregnant, and through the GP appointments, through the hospital visits, through the scans, through the shopping for bits and pieces, through building a nest in the nursery, through all of that. And so therefore, if you're one of the 14 a day families who have that baby death, you know, your life is torn asunder, your love is not eradicated, and your love is the ultimate love that would have been had that baby been born healthy.
Love doesn't stop, does it? The love doesn't, you can't put a lid on that love, or if you certainly, it's damaging to put a lid on any of that. Yeah,
you can't put a lid on it, and that is the challenge that we are seeking to address here, because it is complicated, because you haven't got memories to fall back on, like if an older child dies, never mind a young adult, or indeed a grandparent or a parent. But you as a man may not really truly understand that love. It may be your first child, and even if you're struggling to get the understanding, friends, family, society compounds that confusion by not acknowledging your love in necessarily to the level that you're feeling it. Some do. I know well my friends and family members who were able to deal with this and show empathy, and that is deeply appreciated, but many cannot, and that's not through any characteristic fault of theirs. It's just that this is not understood. It's complicated, and however, it compounds your own confusion, pain, anger, and therefore it is so important that this confusion and pain and anger does not eat away at you as some form of cancer and affect you in other ways. You know, I know parents who've been in touch with us who have had similar lengths of bereavement to myself, but never addressed it at the time. Fathers who've done that. And I also know of fathers who are more recent who never addressed it. Pretty horrific stories of, you know, men taking their own lives on the birth date of their baby. I know of another man who boarded up the nursery door and wouldn't let anyone into the nursery. He was doing what he thought was right. But so it comes out in some way, shape or form. And also what is immensely difficult as well is for, in this circumstance I'm describing, is for men to pick up the phone, men to put their hand up to say, I need some help. I endlessly admire both parents who approach Sands and ask for help. I endlessly admire the men who come along to our meetings. they're kind of there. I think I better go to this because she wants me to go, and then they start chatting away. And you know, it's not as uncomfortable a situation as they may have expected, but it is. It takes nerve for us all at whatever situation in our life, whatever our anxiety or trauma may be, to put our hand up for help. But there are times in life, I fervently believe, that in a long and rich life, that all of us need help at some time, and there's people out there to help, and we need to be aware enough to recognize when we're on a low and when we need help, and put our hand up and look to find it. Sometimes it's not easy to find the right help, but the act of looking takes bravery and sometimes a bit of perseverance, but it can be richly rewarded with a level of acceptance of what has become part of your life.
So if we're to summarize what we've spoken about, really, we need to be acknowledging how significant a man's grief is, how deeply this affects a man, even though he may not show it, he's feeling it, and he's going to deal with it somehow. It's going to come out somehow. When any of us reach out for help, there is help there, and there's certainly help here with Sands and possibly other places too. But when we do reach out and we find a safe space where we can unpack these feelings, we also find that we're not alone, that so many other people, I mean, 14 a day. So that's 28 parents a day are going through this. So we start to find common ground with other people, a deeper understanding. We can unpack it together. We can find a way forward. 14 babies a day. So we can look at why, you know, we can keep asking why. We don't know why. And why do parents have to go through this? You know, we can ask that over and over. We don't know. But 30 years on, Brian, you're still moved, touched, experiencing those feelings, which is healthy and natural. You're not bottling those feelings up. But is it that life sucks? Is it that life's just cruel? You know, we wouldn't wish this on anyone. But is there anything positive, anything good, anything enriching that can come from this terrible, devastating, helpless experience?
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, everybody's different, and each female, male will deal with their experience and their grief and their pain differently. You know, indeed, I'm come from quite a large family. I have 4 brothers, and there'll be a number of my brothers who despite the same upbringing will have had would show their emotions in a different way. And I'm far from unclear whether my personality in in showing emotion is born out of Siobhan's death. I can't remember whether I was a person who shared emotions easily prior to her death, or it's something that's come from her death and that experience. I don't know. What I would say though is that, and I sometimes hesitate in putting this across, but it is true, and it's borne out of now, 32 years since Siobhan died, that in those early months, my life was consumed by grief. It coloured everything. I went back to work. I was really lucky. Back in 1989, I got 5 weeks off work. I went to my GP and said, can I have a sick note? And he gave me 4 weeks on top of the week you got off as self-certificated. And that, as much as anything else, was to support my wife, but also for me just to be ready to face the world again. But in that time going back to work, I remember a couple of years after, I couldn't. My job called me to remember things and dates and events and incidents and situations that took in the past. But I had a year or two when I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember whether it was a week ago or 8 months before. I was all over the place, and because my world was consumed by grief. But in time, our grief doesn't go away, and my love for my daughter doesn't go away, but the rest of my life grows around it. The scale of my pain is there, and I acknowledge that, but I've had a life that's grown around that grief, and to the point where not initially, and therefore I'm sensitive to what I'm going to say. If any recently bereaved parents are hearing this, is that gifts have come to my life as the result of Siobhan's death. I was able to put work in a better perspective than maybe I would have otherwise. I didn't always do that, but I tried. And if I had a tricky situation developing at work, I always had the fallback of knowing, well, I got through Siobhan's death, so I can get through this nonsense that I'm dealing with at work. I do believe, I've got no way of knowing for sure, but I do believe I am a different person through Siobhan's death. I believe that that person, I like that person more than what would otherwise have been the case. I believe I'm more appreciative as a father than I would have otherwise have been. And the miracle of a healthy birth is not taken for granted. And the privilege of having children and grandchildren is powerful. And I believe, whether my long-suffering wife would agree or not, I believe that we are a better couple having survived the trauma of that experience. Now, all of that is due to a little baby who's now buried in Romford. So there are definitely gifts that your babies can give. It takes time to see them, but if you stop and just look, you can find them, and that then can help with the key to me, which is acceptance of what has become your life. You can't change that. You can accept it ultimately and deal with it. Don't get me wrong, I would much rather have 3 live children and be the person I would have been if Siobhan had been born healthy. But that's one of the ways I deal with it. It's one of the ways I rationalize it. It's one of the ways I come to acceptance. It works for me. But I'm conscious it may not work for everyone, but it's something that it does work for me.
And one last thing I think too, that's just come to mind as you were talking, was the memory of you doing the bike ride for Sands, and that was as you retired and you had more time to dedicate. But the therapy, how therapeutic that was for you to do something for the charity, and also
that's a really good point, Jack.
Thinking of, with Siobhan in your heart and in your mind as you did that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, looking at the past 32 years, I mean, we did work hard on our grief in those early years, and we did have counselling in those early years, early months indeed. And then life goes on. Life gets busy. We're privileged to have further children, and the time-consuming nature that brings in for young families. I was working very hard, paying bills and mortgage, and the feelings around Siobhan became just below the just buried a bit, I suppose. When then I did retire and I had more time, I wanted to do some fundraising. I naturally chose Sands, who indeed as a charity were not very active in our area back in Romford at that time. So we didn't actually have great use of them at the time of our baby's death. But I knew they did fantastic work. So I did a bike ride in Ireland, the length of Ireland, the Irish equivalent of Land's End to John O'Groats. And I did it for Sands. I had a they give you a cycling top, and I had Siobhan's name. There's a lovely story actually. There's a local printer in South Woodham actually, and I took the shirt along to him and asked him to put Siobhan's name in it. He asked me what I was doing it for, and I told him, and he just gave it to me. He wouldn't charge me anything for it. And so I did that bike ride for Sands and in her memory, and doing something that was physically demanding and the training involved. I mean, for me, it was a bike ride, quite a long one, but whether it's whatever it is, whether it's a sponsored walk, whether it's a 5K run, whether it's whatever the activity is, whether it's a cake stall, a jumble sale, whatever the activity is, if you to do that for a charity close to your heart, and in this case to do that in memory of our baby, I processed a lot of grief on that bike, because you're doing something purposeful and active and beneficial in her name, which you would have been doing many thousands of times as a father if she had lived. And so the act of doing something purposeful in her name was extremely cathartic for me, even though that was about 25 years after her death. It was a very powerful experience, and for little things like fundraising, whatever you do, it is a demonstration of your love for your child. And you don't have to demonstrate your love for your child by necessarily words or tears or whatever. A demonstration through a bit of effort in whatever that is personally enriching. But going back to the challenges of male female couples getting through the pain, it can be, whereas you as a male may not wish to talk to your female partner too much about your own pain because of wanting to protect her, if she can see you doing whatever it is in the memory of your child, that can help, and help to improve understanding between you as a couple and avoid you being one of the 60%, or finding your solace in some other more destructive medium. So, and from that, funnily enough, doing that, I got in touch with Sands, and here I am 6 or 7 years later, talking on a video to you about it.
And they were delighted that a man had stepped forward as well to help, weren't they?
Yes, I mean, increasingly men are, and there's a wonderful organisation now called Sands United, which is the quite a number of football teams have grown up around the UK, where dads play for a Sands United football team in different parts of the country. There's and where fathers can come together, play football, talk bollocks, and be together, and may or may not even talk about their babies, but at least they're with like-minded people. And I guess I'm a bit unusual. I'd love to be playing for Sands United, but my legs and body doesn't allow me to. And being a grandparent now, I guess I'm kind of different. Sometimes I think, sometimes I'm very conscious. I was speaking to a woman on the phone this week who contacted Sands. I'm very conscious that as a man, you're speaking to a mother who's bereaved, and does she really want to speak to a man? And I'm also very conscious that I'm a grandparent now. I'm 32 years since the death of our daughter. And sometimes I wonder, is it not better for younger fathers to be supporting others? But on the other hand, I've got a happy life. And if I was told that in 1989, I wouldn't have believed that. Look at me.
Yeah.
I don't know why I get some wobbly voice, but anyway, it's when you relive it, I suppose. And in talking about it like this, you are going right back to the reality of that time, and that's why in a second like that, I think of 1989 and how bad it was.
So it never goes away, but you can have a wonderful life again in time, and you've got a wonderful life, and you will smile again, and you certainly smile, and it's lovely to see. So yeah, is there anything else that you want to mention, Brian, or do you feel we've covered?
I think we've covered a hell of a lot. I think one of the important thing is, you've told me about the wonderful group that you're involved with, it's men, Joe, and I guess the thing to say is that men's feelings are complicated, but they're so important. Your feelings. We're human beings, our feelings are our soul, and they count so much. There's many who want to care and support and hear your feelings. There's many fantastic organizations out there. In terms of baby loss, there's many around the hospitals. Hospitals now have got great bereavement care and increasingly bereavement midwife specialists. And there are more avenues, whatever your loss, anxiety, pain is, there are many out there. It takes a lot of guts sometimes to recognize your own feelings, and then even more guts to pick up the phone or send an email to an organization. And indeed, that phone call and that email may at first not hit the right one for you, but I would urge people to recognize that at many times in our lives we need a bit of help. Sometimes more severe than others, and your feelings are massively important. You deserve to have them articulated. You deserve to express them. You deserve to have them heard. And there are many agencies and charities and individuals who can provide that, and indeed men and women who have had similar experiences, and men who can support you, who can understand you. And the fact that people are in your group, Joe, just goes to show they've already had the guts to recognise that, and the importance of their feelings, and putting them out there is a chance in which you can get on the rest of your life, and hopefully see some of the gifts that have been created by whatever the trauma is. In this case, mine was baby loss, but talk it, don't bury it. Bury it kills you and kills those around you. So that's enough, I think.
Perfectly said, because our feelings are meant to be felt. Ultimately, that's why we have them, and they're not meant to stay the whole. They're not meant to stay there. feelings are meant to be felt to move through us. So, and as you say, it takes huge courage to reach out and say, I need help with this, I can't deal with this on my own. But it's perfectly natural, and huge kudos to anyone who does, because it means you can start living again. Yeah, so thank you so much, Brian. It's always lovely to chat with you anyway, but it's it's an important conversation to have. So thank you for giving your time, and I wish you a lovely day looking after your grandchildren today.
Oh yes. There'll be times today when I won't appreciate it, but I have to look at the bigger picture.
Absolutely, and deep down you will. Yeah. Thank you, Brian.
Cheers, Joe.
Okay.
Bye.